The courts send us people to that jail. We don't have a choice whether or not we can take those folks. We follow the statutes of the state. In the sentencing laws of the state, we don't have a lot of control over those things. There are some things that we can control, and Larimer County has been a leader in keeping people out of the jail, in alternative sentencing. The mental health program that we just passed last November. Nobody likes to see people go to jail. We want to see people be successful. Everybody on this panel and everybody on the board wishes we didn't have to spend a dime on a jail. But unfortunately for some folks, we do. There are a lot of folks that have spent a lot of time thinking about this and thinking about alternatives. There's no surprise. We have a lot of different perspectives on how to operate a jail, how it should be operated. We think that's a good thing. Those different perspectives bring new ideas, challenge our way of thinking, and in many cases have resulted in doing things differently and in getting better public policy for our county. So we are very fortunate to have a panel of experts who have thought about this and bring these different perspectives that they're going to share with us today. So I hope this is helpful. This panel is helpful for you in understanding some of the challenges facing the county. I'm now going to introduce my colleague, Commissioner John Kafalis, who will present the moderator to us this morning.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning and welcome. My charge is to introduce the moderator, who I'm standing in front of here. My apologies, sir. Dr. Prabha Unitan is the John N. Stern Distinguished Professor of Sociology at Colorado State University, where he has been a faculty member since 1987. He received his PhD from the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. His research and teaching involve a range of topics related to criminology and criminal justice, specifically violence and corrections. In his time at CSU, he has authored or co-authored 5 books and edited 3 research journals. Dr. Unitan served as president of the Western Social Sciences Association in 2014-2015 and is currently president of the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences. He and his family have resided in Larimer County for the past 30 years. He will be presenting the panelists and also explaining more about the format this morning. Thank you all very much for being here.
And thanks to the other commissioners who are here as well. So this particular topic that we're dealing with, jail facilities, expansion of those, etc., the panelists who are here will be discussing those in detail, various aspects of that. I just wanted to take a moment here at the beginning to just remember the 12 people who were killed yesterday in Virginia Beach. So let's keep those people in mind. Moving on, the panelists are going to be talking, as I said, about jail expansion, jail maintenance, etc. There's going to be controversial, contentious issues that will be brought up. This has always been, that kind of topic. I've worked in corrections, or studied corrections, I should say, for about 40 years now. And every time these issues, whatever they are, any aspect of it comes up, it's always very controversial. So what I hope we will be able to accomplish in terms of our discussions here is maybe less of the heat that's associated with these topics, and more light that is shed on this, and that we'll have an informed discussion, we'll have a lively discussion, and yet at the same time, we'll agree that there are, again, different perspectives on these. I will first mention the names of the individuals, and then I'll give them a little bit of time to introduce themselves more specifically. So when I introduce you from the right to the left, from your left to the right, you'll know who they are. Our first panelist is Carol Block, Larimer County Finance Director. Second panelist, Gary Darling, Larimer County Criminal Justice Services Director. Third panelist is Catherine Hay, Fort Collins Office of the Colorado State Public Defender. And our fourth panelist is Sidna Rashid, a community member and prison reform advocate. Our next panelist is Justin Smith, who apparently has changed his first name to Sheriff. And our last panelist, our second last panelist is Shirley Conan, Keenan, I'm sorry, who is with the Fort Collins Homeless Coalition. And then the last panelist, sitting next to me, is Nick Warren-Lau from Outreach Fort Collins, and he's the program director. All right, so if you don't mind, just introduce yourselves and your connection to this particular topic and your, maybe briefly.
I'm Carol Block, and I have lived in this community for about 25 years. I'm a CPA, and I serve as the county's finance director. In regard to this particular project, my role and my expertise is in obtaining financing to actually do the project.
My name is Gary Darling. I'm the Criminal Justice Services Director for Larimer County. Within Criminal Justice Services, we have community corrections, pretrial services, and alternative sentencing department. Within those departments, we have 17 different programs, all designed to keep people out of jail and have them serve their time in an alternative facility, either serving time and just integrating into the community or going through treatment programs.
Good morning. I'm Catherine Hay. I'm head of the Public Defender's Office here in Fort Collins, Colorado. I've been in this community for the last 25 years. My husband and I raised our 2 children here, and during that time, as a public defender, I've seen some enormous growth in the city, and it's been a fascinating project to see the jail as they've developed, to walk down in the basement of the old jail and come over to the facilities on Midpoint to see the alternative sentencing department grow over that time. As a public defender, many of our clients are individuals who are incarcerated, sometimes for long periods in this jail. I've practiced in Larimer County, and before that in La Junta, in Trinidad. Oftentimes I've been up in Jackson County and in Morgan County, and I've seen the facilities across the state, both as the county jails and to the prison populations. We deal solely with an indigent population, so everyone is of modest means and has difficulty paying daily bills, let alone bonds or issues that cause disruption, such as loss of jobs with incarceration and housing. So we as defenders are in the jail on a daily basis and see the impact that incarceration has on our community members. And our office consists of 22 defenders, 6 investigators, 6 administrative staff, and we're daily in the jail. So we have a lot of experience with how the facilities work and how they serve the population, and the impacts that they have in the justice system as a whole, and the, the outcomes that one can expect out of the justice system based on the actual physical facilities as well as the people that staff those facilities here.
Okay, my name is Sidna Rashid, and I'm honored to be included on this panel. I'm here because I am a concerned Larimer County taxpayer. I don't have specialized knowledge. I just have a sense of what is right and wrong to me. I think it's wrong to keep people in jail because before their court date because they don't have enough in savings or assets to pay their bail. Almost 2 out of 3 people in the Larimer County Jail today are there because they couldn't afford their bail. This isn't right. The county officials will say, look at all the felony charges. It's a matter of public safety. Remind them that those are only charges. Convicted felons are housed in the state prison system. If bail has been set, it's no longer a matter of public safety. County officials will tell you that they have a wonderful pretrial services program designed to get people out of the jail before their court date, but the average daily population of pretrial inmates held in the Larimer County Jail rose from 215 in 2011 to 348 in 2018. That is a huge increase. On average, 133 more people each day. This doesn't look like success to me. During the same period, the number of jail inmates not in the pretrial category, those being held for other jurisdictions, and those who were sentenced to the Larimer County Jail stayed stable at around 200 on average each day. The jail is at capacity because it's full of people who can't afford their bail.
I'm Justin Smith, your Larimer County Sheriff. I've been with the office for 30 years. My wife and I reside here. We raise 2 boys here as well. I've called this community home. It's certainly good to see Dr. Unithan. He was actually a professor of mine in graduate school down at another university away from here.
We don't mention the name.
We don't mention the name of that university. And I can attest he knows corrections because I can say he has been in the jail more than anybody else in this room that doesn't work at the jail. Dr. Unithan has brought students in over the years and made sure that students studying criminal justice get to see the actual inner workings of a county jail, ask the questions, and go through those. So certainly that's an important piece. I appreciate all of you taking your time to be here today and would encourage everybody here, without staying, I encourage you to come by and visit the county jail because we can set aside the biases. I just want to tell you what you see on television on these jail shows, I despise seeing. That does not represent the conditions that we create and work to create in your county jail. So beyond coming here, I encourage you to set up with us and take an hour or 2 of your day to come out and visit the jail. A little of my background, in addition to the jail responsibilities, obviously your sheriff does law enforcement in the county, the courts officer for the county and all the courts if you're in the courts building, your fire warden for the county, as well as search and rescue coordinator. So many hats that go on. The jail is certainly a critical piece because the county is the only one that operates any sort of a lockup within Larimer County. So it's an important piece. In addition to serving as your sheriff, I have many other roles. I actually sat over a decade ago on the Island Grove Regional Treatment Board and worked a lot on those kind of issues. I'm currently vice president of the Realities for Children Board to make sure we're dealing with kids who are suffering neglect and abuse. Have many other roles like that. I'm just as invested in the community as well and want to see positive outcomes, and hopefully we'll have some good discussion today about how we see some of those outcomes in the future of Larimer County.
Hey everyone, my name is Shirley, and I'm here because I'm a community organizer in Fort Collins with an organization called the Fort Collins Homeless Coalition. So I work with a lot of different folks who are formerly incarcerated, who have been directly impacted by the jail and by police. Work with a lot of undocumented immigrants and vulnerable people in the community and other people who have been disproportionately affected by the system. And I also bring to the panel the aspect of myself as a woman of color who has been impacted by police harassment, who has grown up with family members who my relationship has been impacted because they have been in jail on and off and eventually gone to prison. So intimately understanding the impacts that this has, not just on taxpayers' money, not just on laws and policies or studying this, but that this is a matter of life and death and well-being, and not seeing people as disposable, but understanding that we want to imagine and actually work towards a community where we are essential and not disposable.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Vernilau. I'm the program director for Outreach Fort Collins. Thank you for having me. Outreach Fort Collins serves the downtown area in 2 formats. The first is to curb disruptive behaviors by individuals who are in public spaces. The second is to develop and maintain relationships with them and ultimately get them connected to services in the community. Many of those are at risk or homeless individuals. We also serve in partnership with Special Agency Session, work with them to try and get people into appointments on time, and build relationships and make sure that they know how important it is to maintain that relationship with the court system, with municipal courts. We also work with the transitional sentencing program, where our staff will go and intervene with an individual who is currently in the jail and try and do paperwork, do applications for housing, for other programs within the community, and try and get them connected to services so when they're discharged, they have a plan and a place to go that isn't the streets.
Okay, thank you, panelists. Just want to give you a slight outline of what it is how we're going to proceed through this forum. We will first have a set of questions that already have been circulated to the members of the panel, and some of them will be answering some of the questions. Not necessarily everybody will be answering all of the questions. So when I indicate or when I read the question, those of you who have signed up, would you please raise your hand and then answer the question. Following that, we will have a public forum, which basically allows you to ask questions of the panelists. And obviously that is, from my perspective, the most important part of this particular forum. There are question cards, which are, Michelle will show us where they are. Here, there's some in the back, and there's some over there. That, if you don't mind, after you're done writing your question, pass on to Michelle, and she will then pass them on to me after perhaps grouping them for similarity. Following that, we will have a slew of final statements from all members of the panel. All right, so with that, let me move on to the first question that some of those panel members have indicated they would like to answer. Does Larimer County need to improve and or expand the jail? Why or why not?
To me, this is two separate questions, the needing to improve the jail and then needing to expand it. I think are very different things that need to happen for different reasons. So humanitarian improvements to the jail are important. And Larimer County Jail needs refurbishments to bring the building up to safe and sanitary conditions. However, incarcerating people unnecessarily in jail is, as I'm sure Sidna will talk about more, is costing us millions of dollars, and this is contributing to overcrowding. But overcrowding of the jail is not a justification for expanding it. Instead, what we need to be doing is reducing the jail population. So instead of wasting resources on expanding and building more cages to put human beings in, we need to be reducing crowding, that is investing in resources such as diversion and re-entry programs to reduce the jail population and help people get back into the community. The best way to improve people's conditions is to get them out of jail and back into the community. And I also just want to touch on that something that is used as a justification for expanding the jail is that the building, again, is problematic, right? And that it needs to be updated. But that is not a justification for expanding and doubling the size of the jail. Because by doing that, we are only perpetuating the fundamentally violent conditions that imprisonment is. So we should be closing or not increasing the jail size, again, reducing the population and building up alternatives to imprisonment instead of just expanding the scope of the jail. And then also 60%, according to an ACLU report done 2 years ago in Colorado, 60% of people in jail experience mental health issues. And jails are not, and they will not, ever be adequate places to offer care or support for people with mental health issues. What we need to be investing in community-based mental health support for people instead of having support that is tied to law enforcement, that's tied to imprisonment. So the people in jail should be diverted to these resources in the community instead of being put into jail. And then last, I'll say that something I've heard from the county and from other people is that improving the jail will actually help women and help trans people. And I would just say that there's nothing feminist about putting people in cages. And that if we cared about women, if we cared about trans people, if we cared about gender nonconforming people, we would not be developing this new facility to be putting them in. And that trans women of color are among the most targeted, and that many of the women who are commonly locked up in jail are there because they were defending themselves from domestic violence, rape, and sexual assault.
Justin, you had your hand up.
You bet. Thank you, Prabha. And actually, I think this is a good chance to show we have a lot more in common on this discussion than I think a lot of people may come to the table with, of recognizing several of Shirley's statements about what we refer to legally as the conditions of confinement, and when somebody's incarcerated, what those conditions are. I can start out by asking you to, out here on the floor, draw a 9x13 box. That was the standard size of jail cells as they were constructed, and this jail that we're currently occupying started in 1983. And that was the size you worked with. And I just remind folks, for those who've been around long enough, you probably remember 200 West Oak when the county jail was down there. If you've not seen the pictures, catch me. I'll be glad to send you pictures. That was the old rows of bars and cells. And you make the reference to animal cage. That's exactly what that environment was. And the citizens at the point from the 50s to 83 made that change. It actually took a court order because there was not a desire to improve conditions. And we got a court order that actually just expired earlier this year to change those conditions, improve them. But they're still a 9x13 cell. They're concrete, they're steel, and they have a window about that wide, about that tall, 2 people in them. And the reason I bring that up is that's how the jail is built. And it's pretty easy to understand. Jails are built in such a fashion, they're not made to remodel. We can't take out a wall like you and I can at our home. Those cells are built as they are. The only thing you can really do is just dismantle those. Well, we've got a jail that started in 1983, was expanded in about 2000, and opened 2000, 2001, but very similar type of setup. We opened it up a little bit more as we came through. Challenge we got is that was 20 years ago. We went through that expansion. We've since added 100,000 residents to Larimer County. There's just a reality. There's more folks. There's more people on the roads. There's more need for parks and open space. You name it, there are more needs. The county jail is not immune from those changes in needs. So when it comes to space, we're certainly there. This was a 20-year expansion by the plans back then. From there, I can tell you what we're looking at to a large degree is improving that jail environment. And I tell folks, in 1983, that was a tremendous leap from animal cages to the cells we have today. However, just like the Oldsmobile my dad bought in 1983, it's not so good as it was in 1983. The tape deck is not modern, and the way we treat people who are incarcerated, thankfully, has improved tremendously in the last 35 years. What we've got is a building that doesn't change with that. So a big part of what we're looking at, the process of planning is still fluid, but what we're at right now is the expansion includes 2 pieces. One is just the support space. The area for medical treatment of those incarcerated has not grown since 1983, 35 years later. There were a little over 100 inmates in the jail at that time. Now we run between 500 and 600. So with that, there's certainly a need to have better medical care. We need to expand that. We need to expand the kitchen, the other support areas for inmates that gets them in classrooms. We're doing things with medically assisted treatment for those with drug addiction. We need the space for that. Plus, what we've done is this jail we're currently in was actually built with all the support space for a little over 500 inmates. It's now had the bed space because we've had to double bunk to push up to 650. And so we've crammed more people in. I don't think those are better conditions. So we do need that additional space. But as we're looking at new beds to the facility, I think it's important to understand nowhere in our design are we drawing 2-person concrete, small 9x13 cells. What we're looking at is bigger areas. We're referred to as more of a dorm environment, 4, 6, 8 people together. So you're going to have social interaction. We recognize people with mental health and medical and other issues and substance abuse. That interaction helps them. The new facility beds that we're looking at also have a medical component, because right now, when somebody comes back from being in the hospital, and one point last year we had 5 inmates that were in local hospitals, they come back, I don't have medical beds whatsoever. They're not programmed into the building. We have to put them back in a steel bunk. I don't think that's the right environment. We're building a wing onto this that has a true medical environment. We're opening it up with much more glass, much more natural light, much more open design, ability for them to connect with the right kind of folks and provide help. So that's what the design looks like. With that said, again, you can't remodel, you can't change those cells that are there. And the way that the facility is built, I'd love to simply remodel what we've got, but there's no part of that jail that can be simply closed off to remodel. We have to build space outside, put some of the programmatic pieces in there, and when we've done enough of that, then you can go back and rebuild what was there in the support space, because the jail was built like this, and then over the years, the expansions went around it, so we're kind of stuck in the middle. The last thing we did to expand beds, just so you guys have a feel for it, we did something I was told was not wise to do. We built what we called a dormitory with 48 beds. It was an open environment where those that were arrested have constant interaction with each other in a positive way. And we were told that's going to be violent, you're going to have problems, the deputies can't control it. It's actually been very well controlled. And that was a little bit of an experiment that we created, and that was using the old alternative sentencing dormitory, or the warehouse piece that was there. We made it into a dormitory. So with that, I just hope to paint a picture to you of where I think this is moving forward. It's $75 million that the county's looked at, a lot of money. It is. I look at it as an investment. The citizens of this county at the ballot box last year chose to tax themselves on 1A for mental health services. Absolutely support that. And I think this is one of those, because the other option is leave people stuffed together in 9x13 cells, or ship them out of county where they have no access to family, they have harder access to their attorney. Those facilities that we may ship them to aren't concerned about the services, they're concerned about the cheapest cell they can build. So I could kick this can down the road and say it would be the next sheriff's problem. I don't think that's the responsible thing. I think to come to you and explain what we're looking at, why we're trying to make the improvements, is the right thing to do. So thank you.
Catherine.
I can echo the sheriff's statements with regards to the focus the county has given towards progressive interactions with individuals and the space and support that are needed. The county currently has a facility where an entire pod is limited to one conference room, which is oftentimes booked by individuals from parole, probation, community corrections, and has become inaccessible. 25 years ago, there were 7 defenders for the Larimer County, and the 8th Judicial District, primarily seated out of Fort Collins, was small enough a community where you would not have to compete for that one conference room. Currently, our staff is over three times as large as it was at that point, and the parole, probation, other counseling, and medical staff that are all competing for those limited resources to consult privately in very critical times about the most private situations are now left to consult with clients out near the mop buckets in the hallway as people are coming and going from recreation. And that is a very, I think I can't tell you how disrespectful that is. That is a terrible circumstance and a terrible situation. I remember getting into a bit of a battle about whose needs were more important with the after hours volunteer members in our community that came in to provide Bible services to individuals. Really very important and supportive, a way to connect individuals with their religion, their community, their support. And it was a time frame where I knew it was after lockdown, and I went in there with all of my righteousness as a PD. I got to see my client. I got court tomorrow. We have business to do. And I'm quite confident I was rude. I'm quite confident that I was entitled, right? And that individual stopped me and said, hey, you know what, we've been here too, and we're volunteering too, and you know what, these people have right to have their religious and spiritual needs met as much. And it takes a humbling experience like that to make you recognize that the facilities that are currently in existence aren't adequate. I am never going to advocate for additional beds because I think there's frankly a natural pressure when the beds are limited and capped to those individuals who are dangerous or violent or unstable in the community such that they are posing a risk not only to others in the community but to themselves. We need humane ways to deal with those individuals. At the same time, this facility is a facility that we need improvements upon drastically. There are now insufficient means for addressing individuals that Shirley was discussing that are undergoing transgender or gender reassignment. There are individuals who are special needs populations that are housed in alternative areas of the jail that actually limit their accessibility to others for their own safety, but actually pose this horrible isolating effect on individuals who are in the most crisis. I do think that this county has the forethought to look at alternatives and to see how alternative sentencing has grown with work enders, with the midweek program, with work release is, I think, a very enlightening experience. When you look back and understand that people that used to be a few minutes late to court would be taken into custody and arrested on a bond, and realizing that now people are getting text messages from their pretrial services making sure that they don't get rearrested. I think it's also important to recognize that our mental health courts are in play to allow individuals participation in a supportive environment that will give them immediate assistance and those connections that Nick was discussing in the community that can provide for basic needs and such. These are important transformations, and the synergy that we can use by working together helps provide some hope that individuals who are suffering from a mental health crisis aren't just going to continue to cycle back and forth. There's an area in the jail that's to north, and it's areas where people who have high security assessments are held. I can tell you that back in the day, you would hear the CERT team chomping in with their shields to come prevent someone from flooding their jail or extracting them, causing an escalation in behaviors, and those kinds of things have been addressed and changed fundamentally. The jail staff knows that that is only going to create more potential risk for individuals that are working there in law enforcement, in the community, and in the clients who themselves are vulnerable to being tased or having physical interactions. And I do think it's important that as a public defender who witnesses these transformations to recognize that as we treat people with more humanity, we are reaping the benefits of that. Our escalation policies have been transformed into de-escalation policies. There is this North Ida area that is open for individuals who are housed in the jail and the intake process that reduces this isolation and the, I guess, encagement and the rage that comes along with a person who may be suffering from incredible anxiety as well as addiction issues or mental health crises at this point in time. And the whole focus that I have is to make sure that we credit those changes and that we recognize that law enforcement and the community are hearing our goals for individuals, that we do want to humanize people and that we don't want to simply incarcerate them without giving them their humanity. And my whole support of the county's improvements here are to give people the dignity and respect that they're due in these times of crisis and treat others that are incarcerated just as we would want to be treated, because the beauty of having been a defender for 25 years is that you suddenly understand that your neighbor's kid has gone to prison because of an addiction, and that the cop down the street has a kid on the run, and the judge's brother went to prison, and your neighbor's brother slit his wife's throat. And horrible things happen in our community, and if you have done this long enough, it's never those people that we're talking about. It's us. And that's same for law enforcement and defenders. And if we can build on some of those things, we can use the focus to make a facility and a product and a policy that really is this transformative change. We have put significant funds into addressing behavioral health needs, and we'll have a brand new facility that'll help supplement this. So my focus and my hope is that we can give improvements and provide those improvements and use the other resources in the community that we've invested in.
Sidna.
Okay, well, I heard both Sheriff Smith and Catherine Hay talk about humane. They want to be more humane to the people who are in the Larimer County Jail. The best humane action would be to let people get out of jail before their court date. In the jail today, I think it's 120 people have been sentenced to the jail. That's all. Everyone else is there. There are 16 who are being held on preventive detention, which means that they committed a crime so heinous that they're considered a threat to public safety. Now, I've been to the jail twice. I was not incarcerated there, but I did go on 2 tours, and I've noticed 2 things that I think need to be improved. That the exercise areas are just awful. They're just these concrete blocks. There's no real air circulation, and there's no sunshine or anything like that. Now, maybe I saw a bad exercise yard. The other thing is, Sheriff Smith mentioned, letting people have social interaction. Well, at the jail now, you cannot have visitors. It has to be by video, and you have to pay for it, or you have to have the hookup, or you have to sign up for the free slots. And let me tell you, there are many people in the prison whose family cannot afford the video calls. So those were 2 things that you can do very easily without $75 million. Another thing is, if the past is a predictor of the future, then if they build it, they will fill it. In 2000, 250 beds came online, and the number of people in the jail, average daily population was 287. And if you take that figure and you extrapolate it out to today, there are 552 people. So let me just back up a little bit. They filled those 250 beds in 5 years. And then in 2018, there are 552 average daily people in the jail. So that's an increase of 92% from 2000, which is enormous. People will say, well, the county's growing. The county has grown, but it's only grown 37%. And also the crime rate has dropped. So I like to hear all of this. All of those people that they need the medical beds for, they're there because they can't get out of jail because they can't pay their bail. The suicide, I think there's been a couple of suicides, pre-trial population. I don't think it's humane to expand the jail. I think it's humane to let people out of it before their court date so they don't feel pressured into pleading out to a charge that perhaps they would not be charged with if they went on. And one more thing, my last sentence. As an optimist, and this is why I'm really against the jail expansion, I believe if that jail isn't expanded, there will have to be an effort to make sure that people aren't kept in jail pre-trial. They'll all tell you, oh, we're doing that already, but I've already talked about the statistics. It's not working what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next question here. I know parts of this have already been addressed by some of the panelists, but let me just ask those who perhaps have not said anything or have additional information to offer for this question. What would be done as part of the jail improvement expansion project? Go ahead, Justin.
You should be surprised the sheriff has a piece on that. No, I did, I think, address a lot of that. But again, to kind of touch base, it really is modernizing where we're at to a large degree, opening up those spaces, the medical, the mental health. And I would echo what Catherine Hay said in here is that a lot of that support, and you can't just add on. You know, we always see that sad situation where we build a new school and then a few years later you put a modular out back. The jail isn't conducive to that. We do need that kind of space within each housing area. Certainly one of the other challenges is those housing areas are overcrowded. So we flat need space that people can spread out so that the programs, because part of what we recognize when folks are incarcerated, for those with issues, this is one of the best opportunities to provide them assistance, provide them a change in direction in their life through programs. A lot of those are volunteer-led within our jail. We have pretty close to as many volunteers that come and provide the programs as we actually have paid staff that are running the facility, and they really help move things forward. So as I mentioned, we're looking at those kind of spaces, the medical, mental health. We have individuals, and I know it was brought up about the vulnerable populations. Unfortunately, the vulnerable populations, we don't have areas designed well for them. Where we're putting the folks with mental health issues right now used to be where women were incarcerated and housed originally when the jail was built. And it's an area that mirrors a lot of the design of the maximum security that Catherine referred to as 2 North. We do that because it's a smaller population. Those that are vulnerable, if you put them in a big housing area, there's a good chance they may be victimized, and it's our obligation to stop that. But we also recognize with those individuals more of that open type of space. So the designs, and I'm actually very anxious for those to come to a point that we can nail those down, release those to commissioners. They can share those with you as well. It's what we're looking at that has more of that open space. And again, for medical, I don't hold it against our local hospitals, but I can tell you when a jail inmate is brought in, anything we could do to get somebody out on bond if they have a medical, we're going to work with our judges to do. But there's folks the judges aren't going to release on bond. So we have them in a hospital, guarded by a deputy there. First chance the hospital gets, you can guarantee they're going to want us back out of there. Just having a jail inmate and a deputy is disruptive to a medical environment. I get it. Problem is they're going to push them out as fast as they possibly can. And when they do, again, they're going back. I don't have medical beds. I have no way to do that. So we are looking at a true medical environment. That's where those individuals could be, so we can provide that care, because we don't want wound issues. We don't want other issues. Along with that, certainly a big piece, there was no ADA in 1983. No protection of folks with disabilities. That has moved forward a lot over the last 35 years. And we have more individuals with ADA-related issues, and the environment we have a lot of bunks. When you have 2 bunks in a room, they're all double bunked. You have a lower bunk that's standard height, and the other they have to crawl up on. That's not a good environment. Concrete and steel, crawling up on that. So we're looking to build areas to put all the bunks lower level, that have more natural light, better sight, ability, and it was brought up, jail suicides. Absolutely take our obligation to protect the people in our custody, and the old parts don't have a good visual to them. We're looking at environments in the housing that would create that, where they can be seen. People rarely, almost never attempt or commit suicide in a correctional environment when other people are there. They do it in solitude. Well, those 2-person cells, when one inmate happens to leave, that's when the suicide attempts generally occur. So if we do these in more of common areas, the ability to do that is greatly reduced. So that's the picture of what we see as the future. There is going to be a county jail. We have an obligation to do it. We want it to serve those that are incarcerated and serve the community. And so this is really going to be going from my dad's 83 Oldsmobile up to a Tesla, as it were, something that really sees the future of what corrections is.
Okay, anybody else wishes to address this particular question? All right, we'll move on. Third question, and again, I'd like to hear from some of the others here. How many people incarcerated in the jail are homeless or transient? Why is that percentage that high? Assuming here it's high.
I'll go ahead and start this one. About 34% of the people in the jail yesterday were homeless transient classifications in the jail. Of those, only 10% would be able to post a bond and get out of jail. The rest of them are there serving a sentence, are being held on a warrant, either locally or fugitive of justice from another agency, or have some other issue there that they cannot be released, like serving a sentence. So it's not like we can do an assessment in pretrial services and move these people out of the jail. We can't, only 10%. And of the 10% that I looked at that could be bonded, 5, I believe, of those had serious felony charges. And a couple others were parole violations, revocation, and probation revocations. So they aren't going anywhere either. So as far as the pretrial aspect of that, yes, they may have new charges, but they can't leave because there's other things keeping them in the jail. Now the bonds, the jail has no authority to release people on the warrants without the court's permission or the person post the bond. That's up to the judicial side of things. That's not up to the sheriff's office. It's not up to pretrial services. We do an evaluation and do reports to the court, and the next question talks about the CPAT, which we'll get into in a minute. But we gather a lot of information for the courts, so the courts can individually look at people and set a bond that's reasonable for each individual. A $100 bond to one person, it might as well be $10,000 for another person. And the courts need to take that in consideration when they're setting bonds so people can get out. And, we talk about pretrial and how many people that we are not getting out, and I'm kind of bleeding over on this one, but these two questions go together so hand in hand. In 2014, we had a little over 800 people in pretrial supervision. Those people were not in jail, they were in the community. Today, we got 1,700 people out of the jail in the community. And last year, we handled over 9,000 cases, getting people out of jail and putting them on pretrial supervision. We cannot get everybody out on pretrial supervision. As the example I just showed with the homeless people that are in the jail, they can't get out. We have no authority to get them out. They're in the judicial system. Once those cases work their way through, they go back to court, the bonds are reset by the judges, their sentences are complete, then they may refer to a point where they can be evaluated and released. But until that happens, they can't go anywhere.
So this, I think, is kind of telling why. It's just telling that these is like two separate questions. Why are there homeless people and then people who are too poor to afford bail? Like they're separate populations. And I think it's important to note that in the last 20 years, that the amount of people who have been convicted and gone to jail and sentenced to jail because they've been convicted of a crime has actually decreased in the last 20 years. This is both in Colorado and nationally. And that what we see today, that local jails are filled with people who are poor and who are legally innocent and who can't afford to pay bail and get out of jail. And so they're just yesterday, again, the statistics for people who were in jail because they are too poor to afford bail and they can't get out. It was like 70-something%, like 2/3 of people in Larimer County Jail can't afford bail and therefore are stuck in jail. And so again, there's this huge overlap with people who cannot afford housing. It can also not afford to get out of jail. It might surprise some people, but what we call homeless people are just poor people who are living in extreme poverty. People in our community who are maybe living with other folks because they can't afford adequate shelter on their own. People who are forced out because they can't afford rent. What we're talking about then is, in these two separate questions, is that people who can't afford bail, they can't afford plea deals, so they will spend more time in jail. It is the cycle that jail perpetuates of poverty. And we know that the percentage of homeless people in Fort Collins has also gone up since 2013 when the CPAT was put into use. So there's obviously a correlation with that as well. And your score on the CPAT, which and we'll talk about more, is it's also higher if you have a prior failure to appear in court. And the people who are most likely to not appear in court are the people who are poor, who have barriers to getting there, who don't have access to public transportation, who can't afford cars, who are women, who are single parents, who are immigrants. So recognizing, again, that what we think of as what we call homeless people and then people who are in pretrial unable to pay bail, it's we are putting poor, overwhelmingly people who are very poor in jail, and they cannot get out because they can't afford to.
Well, this is a really complex question, and I think that Shirley has touched on a lot of the points. But I do want to say that from 2014 to 2017, I'm a numbers person, and the average daily population of the homeless in the jail went from 115 each day to 195 each day. That's an increase of 70%. And we're going to get into the CPAT, and everyone disagrees with Shirley and me about the effect that had. But let me tell you, in 2017, Larimer County spent $8.4 million to house the homeless in the Larimer County Jail. Yes, they might have convicted a crime, but Fort Collins is known for criminalizing homelessness. And what happens is there are 10 municipal, I think, laws against something, crimes, they considered crimes because you're homeless, camping overnight, open container. If you don't have a home, you're going to have to, and there's no bed in the shelter, you have to spend a night outside. So you can get a ticket, and then if you don't go to the municipal court, you'll get a failure to appear, and then the next interaction with the police, they will arrest you and book you into the jail. That's how so many homeless get into the jail. But the other thing is that once you're arrested, being arrested creates conditions where homelessness can quickly follow. There was a study of the inmates in 7 jails that was posted on I think it's the Department of Justice Colorado site, and they showed that they interviewed, I think in 56% of the people they interviewed who hadn't been homeless before they got arrested thought that they would probably be homeless after they got out of jail. So we're talking about a cycle that is almost endless, and it starts quite young for a lot of kids who maybe have dysfunctional families. So also, okay, that's about it. Thanks.
All right. Quick, because we have other questions.
Just a couple of things to clarify. We're talking about the pretrial. Understand there's 2 reasons legally a person's detained pretrial. One is the court considers them to be a high danger to the community, and that's the folks that we have on homicide charges. That's 16 or so, whatever that number is. Most of those are homicide charges. Just the court has said they're too dangerous to be out. The other is referred to as a flight risk, means they won't show up for court. I mean, part of the promise we have as a society is our court system works on, we promise if you have a court summons to show up. So if the court's determining individuals aren't likely to show up, if you're the victim of a crime and the suspect is not going to show up for court, that is obviously problematic. So that's a piece on pretrial supervision. And to Shirley's point, if you went back 10 years, I would argue there was a lot of validity to a system that was built strictly on money, that it was through the bail bondsman system. You had to pay that person. They kept 10 or 15% in order to get you out, and they just kept that money. That was a system that was more tilted towards those of means and wealth. I'll let Gary Darling address the CPAS system, but I can tell you we've made huge advances to push this to use court supervision, so it's not as money-based, and it's merely trying to figure out who it is that's a flight risk. If they need to just have the phone calls to make sure they show up, we've been well ahead of the state on that, making those phone calls like the dentist does that says, you got an appointment next week? Well, you got a court date next week. We do those kind of things. We don't want to see the failure to appear. And then in that system, if they need to have an ankle monitor to keep track of them, check UAs and things like that, we're doing that. So I'm glad to say we've moved away from a system. Is what we're doing perfect? If it were, Gary and his staff wouldn't continue to try to improve it. But it's a system that is working to make sure that folks aren't kept because of money issues.
Nick?
To speak to why the homeless population has such a high percentage in the jails, I think it's really important to know individuals that experience homelessness are significantly higher risk for having mental health or substance use issues. That coinciding with the jail, I think there's an obvious connection that individuals who have those issues around mental health and substance use may be less likely to follow up, show up for court, maybe don't have the capacity to, or the resources such as transportation or money to pay their bond. In addition to that, I think individuals experiencing homelessness really lack the social capital and relationships to maintain those types of appointments. And so the people that they're surrounded by are often experiencing those same mental health or substance use issues, and therefore the expectation of them isn't put there. They aren't being held accountable by their peers because their peers are also experiencing a lot of these same issues, which can be deterrents for them following up. Furthermore, I think appropriate discharge planning and services while individuals are incarcerated need to be improved so that individuals are able to break that cycle of poverty and homelessness by allowing individuals to build relationships and develop an appropriate discharge plan. They will not be then brought back to the street where they may be surrounded by those same types of substance use, same type of criminal behavior. If they have a plan in place, then there's someone they can follow up with, someone that can remind them of appointments and get them connected appropriately to services so that they then have the social capital to no longer be incarcerated. And finally, I think it's very clear that money and other resources such as transportation or even access to a cell phone play a large part in a person's ability to show up for appointments, to appear in court, and to really kind of handle their day-to-day operations, as anyone who has access to those resources kind of finds to be natural. And so without that access, it's much harder for them to plan their day out, and they are literally living hour to hour and maybe day to day, but no longer than that. And so the ability to remind them and keep them accountable for what they are required to do legally is a huge piece.
Go ahead, Kath.
I would definitely echo that. I think that investments in communication, such as telephone connection for individuals that don't have access to a phone, a simple flip phone ability to receive a text, a reminder that you need to make your appointment with your defender, that you need to go take a UA, you're ordered to go appear in court at a particular time, would make an enormous difference. And it's amazing the individuals that are struggling with having to move their residence, meaning their backpack, place to place to place on a daily and nightly basis, how easy it can be to forget what day it is, what appointment you have. It's a simple fix. We've seen enormous changes just by reminding people of their responsibilities and facilitating them. I'm concerned sometimes about these unintended consequences. I know recently there's going to be some expansion at the Justice Center, and how that impacts our jail population. I can see from our end as a defender, if you're taking the probation department out of the first floor of the Justice Center and moving it out to midpoint, and having no way to have individuals immediately have a catch and capture and this warm handoff from one organization to the next to make sure that they're following through with what can be a very complicated system. It creates all these gaps and holes. And a simple bus pass, we keep packets of these at the front desk at the public defender's office, and it's amazing what a difference it can make. If you have that transportation, if you can volunteer with outreach services and get a bicycle for the good summer months, and then try and make other arrangements, I think that investment that the county puts in these alternatives is rewarded many times over. And while it may be important to expand our access to individuals who are already incarcerated, there are so many very economical ways that we can decrease the failures to appear and the disruption that comes along with the homelessness, because Sidna is absolutely right. Those people that are facing short-term incarceration are experiencing this churn and burn in their entire life structure, and it disrupts everything, and it makes it much harder for them to then get back to their appointments and keep the responsibilities that they've been ordered to comply with.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to the next question, and maybe Gary, you can start out answering this, and the rest, can follow up. So you've heard the acronym CPAT a number of times here. That stands for the Colorado Pre-Trial Assessment Tool. So the question is, what is CPAT, and how has it impacted the incidence of incarceration of people experiencing homelessness?
Okay. The CPAT is the first empirical validated assessment instrument being used for pretrial services in the state of Colorado. It was validated again last year as an instrument that can be used to show that people, their chance of being successful on pretrial supervision. Being successful, the definition of that is they appear in court, they commit no more crimes. We watch that very carefully. We gathered that information, plus we put an entire packet together for the courts, which includes criminal histories. It includes who the victims are, if there are victims. Just a plethora of information that we give to the court so the court can look at each case and make a decision on bond. The sheriff mentioned that the bonds here have gone from more of a bondsman type system to a lower monetary bond system. That is correct. What used to be a $10,000 bond here in Larimer County is probably more like a $500 bond today. And we hope to continue that, and there was some legislation that almost passed this year that pretty much would do away with monetary bonds in the state of Colorado, except on preventative detention cases. I think that will continue to be pushed and happen. But the other thing that happens along with the CPAT, well, pretrial services people are interviewing, is that they also ask questions about their mental health conditions. We have a screening instrument that we use. If they screen that they need some help, we put them in what we call mental health pretrial services. We have a number of slots there so that we can help them get to court, help them get through the system so that they don't get an FTA. Can we work with everybody? No. It's a limited system, but we do it. A new program that's just starting up is this judicial district just got a pilot grant from state judicial for a mental health diversion program. So we do that same screen, we make a referral to the DA's office. They decide to go ahead and have an assessment done on that individual by some of Stone Health Partners. If the person screens that, yes, they think they can help them, they go into treatment rather than going into the jail. They continue treatment for 6 months and then their case is dismissed and they're on their way. One other program that we're just starting up is called the Bridges Program. Again, for people with mental health issues, we are going to walk them through the system, show them where they need to get help, how to get through the criminal justice system so that they don't come back to the jail on a failure to appear. I mentioned that we want the courts to look at each individual case. We do not want the courts to take the information from pretrial services and just say, yep, that's the recommendation, that's what we're going to set the bond at. That's not how it works. We want the courts to only agree with this 70 to 75% of the time. Because then we know they're looking at each case. They are not just blanket stamping the bonds that we're recommending And it's just a checkpoint that we have to have in this system. I don't know, I want to go back to the homeless people and the numbers of those people coming into the jail and what we're doing and going through these assessments with those people. In 2014, we had 1,000 people, homeless people, booked into the jail. Last year, we had 2,400 people booked into the jail. So, you know, pretrial services has doubled the number of people that they're supervising. So, you know, we're doing everything we can to divert people out of jail. We're working on getting rid of monetary bonds and moving people out of jail, but there's going to be some people that are going to have to stay there.
Okay, Nick?
In answering this question, specifically to the CPAT, I think it's important to note that some of the questions that are asked are significantly more likely to occur with an individual who's experiencing homelessness, specifically to mental health issues, substance use issues, access to a cell phone, and prior failure to appears. Those are 4 questions that, if answered positive for mental health issues, that makes them more likely. Same with substance use, no access to a cell phone, or previous failure to appears. Each of these questions, which determine a person's pretrial assessment, occur within individuals experiencing homelessness, and that connection, I think, is obviously correlated in the question of why are there so many homeless individuals in jail. It's because this assessment tool asks them questions that statistically they're much more likely to answer positively to. That's not to say that there aren't efforts being done in trying to divert individuals from the jail. However, I think that using this tool in determining whether or not a person is going to be incarcerated is statistically and empirically going to disproportionately affect individuals who are experiencing homelessness.
Let's move on. I think we've had both sides of this question, and then we'll get to you can add your comments to some of the. Please do. Okay. The 5th question: has the county done enough to avoid needing to expand or improve the jail? Sidna, I call on you then.
Okay. Let me turn it on. All right. Well, I have responses written to all the questions, and this one I really had to stop and think, because everyone that I have spoken to about who works for the county and the criminal justice system, and that includes a lot of the people up here, and the county manager, the county commissioners, all of them want to improve the county, and that's my goal too. I want to improve the county I'm living in. We just profoundly disagree about how to do it. I think expanding the jail is a terrible idea. I think people need to be kept in the community. And so the question about has the county done enough? They've certainly tried all sorts of things. They have a pretrial intake service that is probably the best in the state. They have the pretrial services area, which is excellent, but I quoted those statistics to you. It's not working. It's not getting people out of jail. Part of the problem is the CPAT, and here's where I'll start filibustering about that. I agree with Nick totally. When you look at those questions, anyone who is homeless or transient will get a risk category of 1, at least 2 or above. And the likelihood of their being released from court before their court date with on their own personal recognizance without any money is almost 0. So that's why the number of homeless has increased in the jail. The biggest driver, and I think Sheriff Smith will agree with me, the biggest driver of the number of people that are entering the system and being booked in the jail is the DA's office. And there's a wonderful new book called Charged by Emily Bazelon. And it goes into what effect the power, the overriding power that the DA has. They're the ones who decide whether to charge, what to charge. So when you see all these felony charges going up, there was a woman who was charged with 3 felonies and pled down to a misdemeanor. That's a normal tactic that DAs use. And so, you know, if you're charged with a felony, maybe you'll be kept in prison or jail instead of before your court date. A new DA will be elected in 2020. And no, wait, let me go back. A new DA came online in 2012, and he's term limited in 2020. So whether his hiring, whether his practices, I don't know. You would have to ask people involved in the criminal justice system. Perhaps Catherine Hay would know more. Whether he started charging, you know, adding on felonies or what. But I think I'll stop there. Thanks.
Okay. Catherine?
So I think there are some low-hanging fruit that would be easy to address as far as reducing the need for additional beds for incarceration. That includes access to telephones, to have contact. We've already discussed that. I think that a shuttle between the Justice Center and the Detention Center and alternative sentencing would be a critical and an easy return on investment. If people knew that they could get on a shuttle and go from the courtroom over to probation to then be connected to the resources that they would need to comply with pretrial services at the alternative sentencing department, I think that would be an enormous benefit to the county. I likewise think that some of the instrument at the CPAT needs some addressing, some tweaking. I think that the CPAT does have this disproportionate effect on individuals who are experiencing homelessness because of the fact that they are going to score out much higher because they don't have the stability in the community, the telephones, the employment, and other people that can confirm that. That's going to constantly be a factor, but if we could supplement that so that they do have contact and transportation and the stability, I think that would level the playing field drastically. I do think that there is something that is also critical that we as a community do, as our county recognizes that these kind of progressive changes, and I mean that not in a political sense, I don't want to be mistaken here for discussing a movement on a political spectrum, but I'm just saying as a forward-thinking county to have the best services and the best results in our community, we've done what many other communities have not done, and it dates back 15 years, 20 years, when the county hired a consultant. David Bennett came on board, and everyone at that time was using the paradigm shift lingo. And that took hold in the community justice system. I will tell you though, I think as a defender, some of the concern that I have is that it does upset the way we've been doing things. And if you're a prosecutor and you're used to incarcerating people for amounts of possession of drugs, or what our community has said is needed to change the conversation to a public health conversation where people are receiving substance use services and mental health services, that is a fundamental shift. And it's going to erode people's sense of propriety and what they think should occur in these kinds of cases. So oftentimes what we can see on the defender level is what has happened with the drug felonies, which will be changing drastically again in February of 2019 from drug felony 4s down to drug misdemeanors. It's going to affect our community, and the focus is going to be more on getting people help for these substance use issues. These can spawn many other negative behaviors in the community. And what we see is that these then squish out in different ways, in which people have been shoplifting to support habits are now being trespassed from local businesses, and the next time a person goes in and literally shoplifts a candy bar, as in a case that I had this past week, individuals are being charged with class 4 felony burglaries of a business. These kinds of processes are coming about because of the disruption that's going on in people's sense of understanding about what we should do about these behaviors and the problems that we face. And so I think we all have to be very open to recognize we don't want people that are suffering from addiction to shoplift and cause property crimes in the community, and that this does cause real disruption and cause real damage, but that we need to continue to move forward and be open to the fact that if we do this in a different way, if we don't just lock people up in cages furthermore, we're going to have to continue to fund these alternatives, and we're going to have to hold each other accountable. When things go wrong and people cause harm in the community, there needs to be a safe way to address that behavior, to have that incarceration component. Because as a defender, you know that there is a very, very small people who are actually sociopathic, that are violent, but there are some of those individuals that you do need to have incarceration options for. And for the rest of them, we need to be open to that and continue to have this dialogue back and forth that I think Larimer County has been really on the forefront of with regards to the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee on a basis where we can talk bi-monthly and find common ground for these problems.
Okay, let's move on to the last question. If since we're running out of time here, and I will get to your questions here. I'll also say before we get there that there's no way we can ask and answer all these questions. But yeah, at least the more popular ones, we'll try and get answers from the panel. Okay, last question, and I want to go to Carol on this. What would this project cost, and where would that money come from?
Okay, I want to give you 3 pieces of information. I want to tell you about the cost of the project. I want to tell you how the county funds capital projects like this. And I also want to tell you about a tool that we plan on using called Certificates of Participation, or COPs. And I understand that not everybody finds these topics as fascinating as I do, so I will try to keep this pretty short. So first of all, Justin, I believe, mentioned that the cost of this project is $75 million. And I wanted to let you know that the bulk of that, of course, is for the actual construction, the brick and mortar part of this. But it also includes the design and engineering, the site work, furniture and fixtures, and Justin mentioned things such as the need for additional medical areas. So of course there's a lot of cost of furniture and fixtures to equip those, and then also parking. So there is no cost for the land for this particular project because the commissioners had the foresight in 1980 to buy a big parcel of land, which we're all glad as citizens of the community that they did that. The general contractor for this project is J.E. Dunn Construction, and they have a lot of experience in building jails, which is why we picked them for their experience. So how do we pay for this? $75 million is a lot of money. The county sets aside money every year for capital projects, and so we're able to fund some projects with cash, just cash right up front. For example, last year the county opened a building in Loveland for general services. And I don't know if you all have been there, but it's a really neat building, and it also has some nice art from local artists, so it's worth taking a trip to look at. But in this case, $75 million exceeds what we're able to pay for up front in cash. However, in this case, we are able to do this project without requesting a tax increase. And the way we're able to do this is by using certificates of participation, which is essentially a lease purchase transaction. And I know that term, COPs, isn't really well known, but actually this is the most common way of funding public infrastructure in Colorado. Since 2009, counties have done this 50 times for a total of $1.2 billion in projects. So this is not something unusual. And buildings that you may know of that were financed with COPs include the last jail expansion, the Justice Center, also the county's courthouse offices building. So those were all done with COPs. It's just a common tool. So how does that work? And again, this will be short. I don't want your heads to spin over this. But basically, the county sells certificates of participation to investors. And about 50% of those investors are people that live in Colorado, like you and I. And with that money, the county is able to build the project. And then to repay the investors, we make an annual lease payment that includes both principal and interest. And those lease payments, depending on how the lease is structured, might run anywhere from, say, 15 to 20 years. And in this case, we don't know the exact interest rate or the exact term, and we won't know that until we actually do the certificates of participation. And that's planned to be about the third quarter of this year. But the estimate is that the annual cost will be about $6.9 million for 15 years. So that's all I wanted to tell you about the number side. I just wanted to let you know that, yes, the project is expensive, and we do have some tools to be able to do it without a tax increase at this time.
Sidna?
Okay, now this is where I think there's been a little bit left out about the COP. It is a form of debt instrument. It has been used by other counties, but I think the real reason we're using it here is because you don't have to get voter approval. They've taken it because you know of Tabor, which is here. And this was what really shocked me. I was surprised to read an article in January in the Loveland Reporter-Herald that they were planning on expanding the jail. I have fought against this since 2011 was the first jail expansion, and I have to that I got involved in. I have to say that I do not think the jail expansion that you referred to was financed by a COP. I'm pretty sure it was financed by sales tax, but I'll look into that later.
It was.
Yeah. It was a COP? Oh, okay. So anyway, so when I studied, I actually am an accountant, and when I studied the budget, because that's where when I found out about the COP, I read about it, and it is a lease. It's very similar to a reverse mortgage. So I read about it online, and then I studied the budget, the 2019 budget, and it's not a very fascinating document. But I did, after a lot of head scratching, realize that the only unallocated money of any substance that flows into the county comes from your property taxes. So you might have noticed if you own a house in Larimer County, the average property assessment has increased 18.6%. The budgeted property taxes for 2019 is $125 million. So I believe that the county thinks that the revenue from the property taxes will be no problem at all. They're going to cover all of these construction plans that they have. I have a real problem with it because the voters haven't been asked about it and they don't get a chance to vote on it. But my other real problem with it is it's inflexible. You cannot, from all I've read, once you sign that, once that COP is issued, you cannot change it in any way. So if it's issued in September 2019 as planned, there's no backing out of it. You're going to expand that jail. You're going to end up with 882 beds, starting with, it's hard to say because it was 557, but now it's another number. If there's a natural disaster, God forbid, in Larimer County, the Thompson River flood was only 6 years ago, and the county still hasn't received all the money they need. So if you have to pay $7 million for your COP, you're going to have to make a decision. Okay, do we repair this road, or do we lose the county jail? And of course, they're going to have to pay the lease payment. Another thing that I'd like to point out is Although, they've served very ably, the two county commissioners who have really been involved in doing this, Commissioner Donnelly and Commissioner Johnson, are term limited in 2020. I'm kind of trying to figure out what is the rush. Commissioner Kafalis was not involved in any of the planning, so I can't, point my finger at him. And then I have to say that, the county officials will tell you that it will be much more expensive if they wait a year or two to do it. But I really question that. That's an assumption, not a fact. It depends, of course, on interest rates and construction costs. And if you look at what's going on in construction in this county, you have to think that, getting something constructed now would cost a lot more than once the surge subsides.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on without wasting any more time to the questions that have been submitted. Here's, and Michelle has been kind enough to put them together and according to how similar the questions are. First one, which actually connects to some of the things that have been said towards the end of the panelists. If the citizens are capable of voting on taxes for things they support, like 1A, mental health services, why not let the citizens vote on this expansion? Who would like to pick it up?
I agree.
All right. Somebody needs to answer this question. No? Next set of questions focus on the issue of mental health. Right now, what's the current process for the jail deciding can't read that. Sorry for my aging eyes here. Folks who come out and need mental health, obviously with mental health breakdowns, is what I'm reading.
Yeah, they were all kind of about mental health.
Okay, they're all about mental health. So what is the process currently for working with people in the jail with mental health services?
If I can answer that, in a general sense, everybody that comes into the facility, first thing when they come in, there's a set of interviews for anybody that's brought to us, whether it's brought by an officer or brought by the courts. Half of that, I wouldn't say half, but a portion of that is medical. We actually have medical nursing staff that goes through interviews to determine what their medical condition is, and we make sure that they get the appropriate treatments, that they go before the services they need. And we also, we don't look at mental health as separate from our medical. So on the mental health side as well, they go through interviews. The first thing is to make sure they're safe to be there, that they're not a danger to themselves or others, issues with self-harm, things like that. So we're having those conversations up front to make sure those needs are met before folks come in. And we actually reject some folks and send them back to other places, medical institutions or mental health, if they're a danger. So we're working on that. But once they come in, we do have through our medical contract mental health professionals that work with folks. Now, we're not going to fix everybody's problems. It's not to that level. We don't have those kind of resources, and a lot of folks that come are in and out relatively quick. Large percentage of folks that come in never actually stay. They book through, they process, and they're back out. Those are those that bond. But once they come in, we do have those mental health services that do their best to assist those individuals as they acclimate to incarceration. We do have, between professionals and volunteers, folks that come in and get some of those services. What I would add to this, and this is part of I guess, the dream that we have currently, the way the system's built, there's a lobby. When somebody's done, they're released from the lobby either because the court said they don't need to be held pretrial anymore, or they finished a sentence. The challenge that we've got is there's very little transition. We work with all the providers in the community. We work a lot with Touchstone. We bring Touchstone employees in is it Touchstone or Summit Stone? I got lost between Touchstone and Summit. I still remember Larimer Center, but we work with those individuals because the important part isn't just what happens while they're in. everybody that's in our facilities coming back out, with the exception of a couple of percent that go to state prison for long periods. They're coming back to the community. We're working with Summit Stone on those transitions. What we envision in the next step is a mall approach. That those individuals, when they're released, they actually go through, and those providers, it's not simply a handoff later, but we can have them to make sure the services that maybe got folks stabilized while they're there can continue in the community. So there's a variety of things that go on with folks in our facility. Oftentimes we're discovering, and we knew this, but we're further discovering the aspects of addiction and making sure, the issue with the addiction services, nobody can be forced to change. That's a reality. Individuals have to be interested in making that change. So when it comes to the addiction services, we're working to get them connected up on their mental health services. And Lori Stolen is here that if you want to talk to her afterwards, can give you a lot more information. But if there's certain medications that are needed, we don't want them to have the medication when they're there and then not have it when they leave the facility. So there are services, and Lori would be glad to talk to you afterwards, how we make sure those folks can get the medications that they need and get to the mental health services that you as a community are providing under 1A.
So this is a really tender subject for me. I've been one of the founding members of the Wellness Court that has been in play for about 6 years in Larimer County, and on a weekly basis am dealing with a team of individuals from the District Attorney's Office to Judge Field, who is head of the Wellness Court program, to members of the Alternative Sentencing Department, where the Wellness Court oftentimes utilizes bed at work release, not only for an attention-seeking and change in behavior type of assist, but as actually fundamental housing, supportive housing, because we have nothing else available. And the terrible tragedy of this is that you need to contact your state legislatures as well as your local representatives, because people do linger at the jail inordinately long, and their fingers grow long and yellowed, and they become emaciated because they are so mentally ill they cannot be transferred to the Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo. There's been a recent settlement. There is an acknowledgement by the state that these are severely underfunded services. So people who have been found actively incompetent, that is so debilitated by their mental illness that they're not able to reasonably assist counsel in their criminal court cases or understand the roles of the prosecution, defense, and the court, are being held and housed, warehoused at the jail. This is wholly inappropriate, and it has nothing to do with how those individuals at the jail are being treated. It has nothing to do with whether or not the jail staff are trying to mistreat individuals who are ill. That's not the case. We don't have a good system in this country to deal with individuals who have this. We're working on that. I think that there are also, much as a shuttle from the Justice Center to the Larimer to the jail, the Alternative Sentencing Department, and Community Corrections would be helpful. I think a county-funded shuttle to the new Behavioral Health Center would be a critical piece to connect our community, everyone who has needs and crisis services, that would then be able to access the downtown transit center and get to the places that they need to have care. There are innovative practices. I've found the word I need to use rather than progressive, but the innovative practices that are going on in the jail. Lieutenant Schaefer is head of the medication-assisted treatment program, trying to reduce opioid addiction and overuse and death that is so prevalent upon release. An induction method, meaning people who are opiate addicted have access to medications that reduce cravings and can control behaviors that pose such a risk to themselves. After being incarcerated for a week, a person goes out, uses the same amount they've done in the past, and is really vulnerable to death. These are some of the practices that the county is focusing on as far as trying to supplement. Have we done enough? No, of course. We have so many needs. These are real needs. When you see people that are suffering from active psychosis, that again, I'm going to focus on this paradigm shift, that we have to stop simply incarcerating people, because these behaviors that would otherwise be criminal, if the root of those are in a mental illness and a crisis situation, they wouldn't even have been criminal behaviors if we had enough means to challenge those. Currently, the state of Colorado is such that if you are incapable from distinguishing right from wrong, if your behavior is such that you're carrying a sticking around and thrashing at indivisible people around you and causing distress to others in the community that interact with you, that's going to result in incarceration. This isn't the fault of the first responders who are interacting. It's the paradigm shift that we all have to work on so that we're not simply housing these people in the worst of circumstances where their isolation and lack of access to consistent medications and ongoing treatment on a regular basis just exacerbate these problems. So I know that the staff at the Larimer County jails, we're in there on a daily basis. And there is so much humanity and dignity with which those individuals are being treated on a daily basis by the jail staff. But you would ask any jail deputy who's overrun with individuals that are suffering from these psychosis how terrible those circumstances are. And we need to have a bigger solution. So that's one of the things that's important. It's not just this one piece of this puzzle, but recognize that that is something that the Larimer County is attempting to address in these different ways, and know that it's a big, big need.
Gary, and then we'll move on to the next set of questions.
Okay, I just wanted to say that with the passing of the 1A ballot initiative, that hopefully some of these people will be diverted to that facility rather than get involved in the criminal justice system. The other thing I wanted to say is that we have partnered with Human Services. We have 2 people that are in the alternative sentencing building that go to the jail, work with people in alternative sentencing, and work with people in community corrections and go and get them signed up for Medicaid. So when they leave the jail, at least they have that insurance so they can go see somebody and get assistance with paying for the medication or the treatment or whatever. But that needs to be expanded. And I think as this behavioral health facility comes on, we'll see that happen. One of the main things I wanted to see associated with that facility was case management. People will go out into the community and they disappear. We need people to go out and find them and keep them engaged in the treatment in order for them to be successful, whether it be mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment. That needs to happen. The one thing that we just started this year, I believe it was this year, the co-responder program, where we have mental health therapists writing with law enforcement officers to intervene on cases involving individuals with mental health problems. That program has been very successful. They are diverting people out of the criminal justice system. They follow up with those people. They make sure they're doing okay. Where they can, they try to tie them to services. And I think that program will need to be expanded as well. Right now, we got 2 people at the Sheriff's Office, 2 people with Loveland, 2 people with Fort Collins Police Department. I would not be surprised to see some of those double over the next few years. And I will tell you that that case management and that treatment is part of the pro forma for the behavioral health facility. And I'm really glad to see that happen, and the commissioners worked really hard on that. Everybody worked hard on that. I worked on that for 11 years before we got it passed. So at least I'm determined. But there are other things that are going on. I think it'll impact that. But it's not the jail. The jail will not be able to follow these people out of the jail. They stabilize them and they do a great job while they're in the jail, but we have to make sure the services continue once they leave.
Shirley had a quick comment.
Yeah, so so we've seen that the rhetoric from lawmakers and government officials has moved from this kind of punitive, tough on crime rhetoric to rehabilitation and care. I think it's important to note that studies have shown that the forced control and the isolation that is inherent to imprisonment only worsens mental health conditions. And like I mentioned earlier, jails are never going to be an adequate place for mental health care. And what we need to be investing in is building infrastructure for community care that is not connected to policing, not connected to courts or any type of imprisonment or surveillance, but these need to be substantial investments that is made in social welfare, including substance use facilities, user-led, voluntary mental health care that are necessary for the well-being of our community. And any construction then and investment into these mental health care facilities, people have to be able to go and leave when they want to. They need to be treated with dignity. They should not be criminalized, surveilled, or isolated. And they have to be respected as patients and residents. And again, this has to be user-led and self-determined facility that is trauma-informed and has this community accountability piece tied into it, like what Catherine was saying. And it's just so important to note that these mental health facilities and these municipalities and services and programs should not be tied to programs such as the Sheriff's Department or the courts or policing agencies, and they should not be seen as the gatekeepers to necessary services for our community. But we need programs that are operated by our community, that are public agencies that can provide care in other contexts. This is something we all need. And people who receive care should be able to access it without fear of criminalization.
Shirley, turns out you answered the next question, or began answering the next question, so maybe some of the others might want to respond to this set of questions. If the pretrial population is increasing, then this seems, jail expansion they're talking about, seems like an extravagant Band-Aid. Why not put the money into proper facilities such as mental health and public housing instead?
All I want to say is I cannot agree more. We spend a huge amount of money keeping people in pretrial, especially the homeless, in jail. I think it was $8 million in 2017. Red Tail Ponds, a lot of you might know that. That's a permanent supportive housing unit, and that is housing first. It works. It helps people get off the street, back on their feet, and into society. And I think it costs something like $12 million to build, and the county is not, as far as I know, contributing anything to homeless services. You might know, Shirley might know more, or Nick might know more than I do. But let's invest in the community. Let's not invest in a jail where we're keeping people locked up.
Gary wanted to say something, and then Nick.
I just wanted to say that there's 41% of the people in the jail that could get out of jail if they could post a bond. It's not 59%, 41% of the people that are in the jail, if they posted bond, they could get out. So if you look at the way that booking has changed in the jail, from 9,000 just a few years ago to almost 13,000 last year, we are moving those people out of the jail as fast as we possibly can. Give you two examples. The incarceration rate, the number of people incarcerated per 100,000 in Mesa County is 321. In 2018 in Weld County, it was 242. If Larimer County had the same incarceration rate as Mesa County, we would have 1,050 people in jail. If we had the same incarceration rate as Weld County, we'd have 812 people in jail. Our incarceration rate is 157. So we're moving the people through the jail. The other important component of that is 10 years ago, we had the same jail population as Weld County. They now far exceed what we have. They have 800 people in jail. Yesterday we had 524, and that fluctuates. It could be 590 by the end of the weekend. But we're doing a pretty good job of moving people along, in my opinion.
I would just like to mirror what Gary said around case management. We've identified working with homeless and at-risk populations, as well as populations experiencing mental illness or substance use issues, that case management and relationship is one of the biggest factors in overall success for a person. I think within our community, we can also identify that housing and affordable housing specifically for low-income or no-income individuals is a huge need. Outreach Fort Collins, the organization that I represent, follows the Housing First model. The Housing First model, as mentioned at Red Tail Ponds, includes both case management and ongoing housing for individuals who may be at risk or previously have experienced homelessness. But more importantly, I think that we need to focus on the continuum of services for these individuals because The housing isn't available right now, but that's something that we can build. But in order to make sure that they're successful and that they have positive long-term outcomes, there needs to be a continuum of services for these individuals, which may include jail-based intervention services. I think that's something that's being discussed right now that is very important, and we've seen really positive outcomes from. We need case management within the housing that these individuals are at, so that they're not just put into a house and then expected to live normally when they have substance use issues, when they have mental health issues, when they may not have the social capital that a lot of us take for granted. And finally, I think that engaging individuals and intervening and building relationships is how we'll get there. And so it's very important to identify that there are a huge number of homeless individuals or at-risk individuals with these issues that aren't accessing services right now. So we need to figure out a way to get them to access those services and to build relationships with professionals so that they trust them enough to get access to mental health services, access to substance treatment, as well as housing.
Thank you. Last set of questions before we go to the final statements from each of the panelists. Discuss how the jail plans to improve conditions of confinement and partner with community service organizations to provide services post-release.
It sounds like a sheriff question. Hopefully I've addressed most of that question of the things we're looking to do to improve the conditions. Again, where people are housed, we're trying to make that a better, more open environment with more interaction and the right kind of staff there. It hasn't been that many years ago that I was routinely getting the phone calls that said, put them in tents, put them in metal buildings, just, cram people in. We resisted that. That's not the appropriate way to treat people. So I think we're talking about opening up that environment. We're talking about the groups we work with. And certainly, I'm also on the board of the Homeward Alliance, and we work routinely with them, sharing information, working with other service providers, working with Summit Stone, looking forward to working on all the things that Lori and her staff are working with. Those folks that make these lives better and change these lives, I'm very sincere when I talk to those incarcerated before they leave and have a chance to say, I hope next time I see you is going to be at Target or at Walmart or downtown or somewhere else besides here, because we want to see them go out and succeed. So we do have that open with a lot of service providers. It's not a very narrow piece. It's very broad. It's any of those individuals in the community that are helping to change lives. And we hope that with this next expansion, we can improve that, because we recognize opening the door, sending somebody out, a little bit like Catherine talked about, this shuttle, some way to get people back and forth to services. At 3 in the morning when I release somebody out of the jail that has nowhere to go, and I leave them standing in front of Midpoint Drive, that's not good. And that doesn't happen anymore. My staff works with the shelters, works with other individuals to say, where can we get you that's a better place? We can't guarantee their success, but we can do the type of things. And I would certainly encourage all of you to continue to reach out to us. We may not agree on everything. That's the beautiful thing, is we're here today with differing opinions and differing perspectives, and being respectful and figuring out how to continue to improve the community, how to reduce the number of people that come to the jail, and for those that do, try to reduce the chance of it reoccurring. So that's the broad picture. And again, I hope when we get this done that the commissioners will share with you what that design looks like. And the architects we worked with have been very impressed about the advanced type of perspective we're taking on what this next version of incarceration or a county jail looks like.
This is, I guess, what in talk shows they would refer to as the lightning round. So each of you, very quickly, please let me know, whatever it is that you'd like to say to the audience as a summary statement. Carol?
Okay. Sidna mentioned that if we go ahead with funding the jail, that it is a long-term commitment, and this is very true. Once we go down this path, we do have to make those annual payments, just like you do on your mortgage, or we would lose the ability to use the jail. And yet at the same time, anytime you make a commitment, a financial commitment, whether you decide to start a business or decide to go back to college to get your degree, you are limiting your future flexibility, and this is absolutely true. At the same time, the county does have a mandate to provide a humane jail. So this is a reasonable way of meeting that mandate, and I'm sure the commissioners can talk more about the priorities. That's all I have.
Thank you. Gary?
Thank you. I believe that Larimer County has, for a long time, looked at alternative programs to try to get people out of the jail. They just invested $12.5 million about 5 years ago to expand the alternative sentencing building, where we have 207 people in work release. We have 120 people or so through a midweek program. We have about 2,000 people that report there for community service. We have 1,700 people in pretrial services. With community corrections, we have 336 people, all felons that are living at that facility. We have intensive residential treatment programs in there. We have short-term residential treatment programs. We have dual diagnosis treatment programs in there. All things that we are trying to divert people from jails and prisons and integrate them back into society to be pro-social members of our community. I believe that's what we need to do. I believe that treatment works, whether it's mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment. Maybe not to the levels we'd like to see it, but it does work. And I think that we have invested very heavily in being able to do that. When you look at what it costs to hold somebody in jail for a day, it's a lot of money. I mean, we can hold them, at the third of the cost in an alternative program. That's great, and we've done that. But when you have a jail in a pod that's designed for 32 people, and you have to put double the people in there, and you have a day room that's maybe not as big as this is, and you're going to put all those people in an open space, then they may not get along real well with each other. I mean, think about it, your family in the living room, how many times have things happen there, right? So now you got, 48 people in an area that they don't know each other, may not like each other, and you have to control that. That's not good. You increase the tension, you create problems for yourself, for each one of those inmates, and for officer assaults, those types of things. That's not where we want to go. I know that they want people to be successful. We want people to be successful, but we have to have the facilities to be able to do that. Thank you.
Catherine?
I think we need to focus on making sure that we're incarcerating only the people that we are afraid of, that we are concerned are going to be violent, or people that are being punished that the community feels need this incarceration, and to make sure that we maximize the release of everyone else. And so that's going to be a limited group of people. We need to focus on that limited group. And then when we have that focus and we have determined that these are the people that for our community's safety need to be incarcerated, then we need to do the best that we can to provide them the services in that incarceration so that they can be successful when they do get out. That includes access to infrastructure such as sufficient consultation with one another, rooms for recreation, some of the innovative programs such as yoga and access to different kinds of educational programs that make a huge impact in those individuals' lives. People who are incarcerated who are asking us to stay in custody and push their sentencing out for another week so that they can participate in the transformations courses at the jail. That's what we need to focus on, because these things make it less likely that those people are going to come back to jail. Now, I want you to know that daily there are too many people incarcerated. I have an individual who's a veteran who is incarcerated for months on a trial case that's upcoming. He's presumed innocent. He can't post his $300 bond. He's got issues of instability and mental health issues and substance use. He's incarcerated. We should have better funds and systems in place to make sure that we do move forward to this cashless bail and that we are not incarcerating people pre-trial because they simply don't have access to $300. But when we do that, I do submit to you that we need the improvements at the jail to create a better product for our community, and that the infrastructure needs in the current jail are insufficient at this point.
Sidna.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on the panel. And I don't think, I'm part of a group called Resist Larimer Jail Expansion. We have a Facebook page. So if you're interested in following what's going on, please go to the Facebook and contact it. But I think no one in our group, at least I am not saying, let's not refurbish the jail, let's not make it more livable. I would love to have people actually be able to visit with the people who are in the inmates. That's not available yet. The phone calls cost, everything costs when you're in jail, so you're really isolating people. And as I've started studying this issue, I kept thinking, what is the rush? I mean, 2 of the county commissioners are term limited, and the DA is also. There's a lot of changes going on in the country, and we don't know how that's going to play out in our state, actually, and how it's going to play out in jail populations. I don't understand why we can't hold this off for a year or 2, study the issue, really get deep down into the weeds about who is in jail, why are they there, who should be able to get back into the community, and work with the new mental health initiative. And, really work on getting people out of jail and stop criminalizing the homeless and transients. I mean, I think we almost have maybe too many police officers in the area, because I think the bookings goes, I'm not sure, and this is something that we could study. How is the number of bookings affected by the number of police officers? Anyway, I'm against the jail expansion. You all understand that by now. I have a 30-minute PowerPoint, which I'm trying to get up in front of as many community groups as possible. So if you're a member of any community group and you'd like to hear the PowerPoint or have me come and we'll discuss the issue, please come up after this program's finished. And please join my group, Resist Jail Expansion. Help us convince the 2 out of the 3 county commissioners to hold off and to let's just rethink this a little bit. Thank you.
Justin?
Well, we're over time, so I'm going to keep it very short. I think I've expressed my positions and our concerns and what your sheriff's office staff is doing to run the jail in the right way. It's a Saturday. It's a beautiful June 1st day. I appreciate you coming down. And again, I think the most important part isn't that we agree on all these issues. It's the fact that we're having these conversations. It's respectful. In the end, there's no decision to be made that makes every person in the community 100% in agreement. But I think we're working to make the right decisions. I appreciate your time down here, the respect. I respect your opinions, even if you have ones that are counter to where I'm going with it. I understand that. I appreciate it. Thank you for coming down.
Shirley?
I think it's important that we, again, reiterate that there's a difference between remodeling and improving the current jail and doubling the size of the jail and expanding it. And that there is just so much data now, so much more data that is available on the harms that imprisonment and jailing does, and that we as a community, I think, can totally rethink this and not be expanding and building the jail unnecessarily. But this means finding ways for, as a community, to address harm without disposing of people, without caging people. It means recognizing that sometimes jails and these imprisonment systems that are constantly sold to us as an answer to things that we all need, that they only will perpetuate the harm. And I'd also like to say that the Fort Collins Homeless Coalition is going to be having community meetings around outside all summer as like a safe, open dialogue for people to come, and we can come together and talk about what do we actually want to do with $75+ million. What is actually important to us in the community besides just looking to jails for safety, understanding that jails don't equal safety, but what equals safety to us is having healthy food, having control over your housing, having dignified employment, having people that you can trust, that you know will have your back. These are the things that we're looking to build in our community. And I'd also like to say to the commissioners that don't think of this as a one-time you can check the box and say you did a good job. But that community engagement is never ending, and it's an ongoing thing, so I hope they'll have many more opportunities to continue this important discussion, and you'll take seriously people's desire and the right for a more democratic process with this. And then the last thing that I will say is that I think that those who are not directly impacted by jails will only see the surface layers of what harm this does to the community, and therefore they're only going to come up with surface layer solutions that doesn't access these deep-seated, multi-pronged needs in our community. And that's why the Homeless Coalition, it's so important for us that we have leadership of people who are directly impacted by this issue, and that there are people maybe who aren't directly impacted who can identify their privilege in this and who will want to work with us to see a rebalancing of power. We're always looking for that. And so I ask everyone here today to just ask yourself, maybe put on your critical thinking caps, what are the root problems in Fort Collins, in my community? And then what would these deep foundational solutions actually look like that don't just perpetuate the harm, but are coming from a place of healing, rather than just trying to dominate someone with maybe what your opinion is on the subject? Thanks.
Nick?
Some of the work that we do at Outreach Fort Collins, and which I think all of us have as a goal, is to reduce recidivism for individuals so that they're not cycling through, especially with work with homeless individuals, cycling through jail, back to the streets, back to jail, so on and so forth. One thing we've identified through the programs that we work with is that a lot of the individuals that have those high levels of recidivism, what we call high utilizers, there's a slim window of opportunity where a person is in the right mental state, the right substance use state, as well as thinking about the consequences of their actions, where they are actually open towards an intervention. I suggest that we focus on an investment for programs that help with those interventions, that help with the discharge planning, that help with the follow-up after a person has been discharged from jail to reduce that recidivism. Ultimately, that'll save our community money. It will help the individuals that are in the jails and make everyone in our community feel safer.
Thank you. So before we close, I would invite one of the Commissioner Donnelly to respond to the question that was asked earlier about voting, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you. Don't all leave. No, everybody's getting up. So Michelle purposely wouldn't let me speak at the intro because she told me that we would go over time. But look, we just went over time anyway. Thanks for joining us today. I am Tom Donnelly. I'm the chairman of your Larimer County Board of Commissioners. I'm glad to be here with you, and I hope that this format and this panel discussion was helpful to our community. Before I start, can we take a moment and thank the folks who served on this panel? Yeah, and gave us and gave up their Saturday mornings. The sheriff apparently was doing something casual today, and so thank you all for coming out. It was great to hear what you had to say. Also, can we take a moment and thank Dr. Uniton for moderating our. I know. It was a rowdy group, and you did a great job, Doctor. Well done. And then finally, this event was hosted by Larimer County. And so Michelle Bird is our public affairs manager here at Larimer County. She did tremendous work on the front end to get this event set up, and I think it functioned very well. So, I'd also thank my colleagues on the Board of County Commissioners, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Kafalis, for their willingness to use resources to host this event, and I hope it was valuable for you. Finally, there were probably many things you could have done with your Saturday morning. The fact that you chose to spend several hours of that with us means the world to us, and I hope you really believe that. We care deeply about these issues, And this is hardly a rubber stamp by the Board of County Commissioners. It's part of the reason why we have these forums and these events. And our doors are always open, literally and figuratively, through email and phone calls and visiting us, making public comment, to talk about these issues at greater length and at greater depth. In fact, I'm personally receiving the 30-minute PowerPoint myself in the coming weeks to learn more about Cinda's perspective on these issues. So I'll get right to it. And I don't want to take too much time, but the question was asked about why is this not on the ballot? Why are citizens not being asked to weigh in on this at the polls? And I would say, the political philosophy of Greece, which Commissioner Kafalis appreciates greatly, and the governmental structure of Rome, right? And so we have a representative government, and we and the purpose of that is really that we are your representatives. We stand for election, and we're always 4 years away from being term limited, even if we're not term limited, right, Sydney? And so we are charged with understanding these systems and what goes into the function of different services at the county, and making decisions on behalf of the people that we represent, not for you, but on your behalf. And so that's a very important aspect of this that I think we need to think about. Whatever it was 2010, I don't remember what year it was. When we built an alternative sentencing building for cash, very similar to this proposal now, and used it to divert people from the jail, we didn't ask citizens to vote on that either. So think about the balance that's required. When no less than the chief of our own public defender's office says Larimer County has been very progressive and has tried to do programmatic solutions to limit incarceration, I think we should listen to that. And so this is, unfortunately, an expensive proposition. It's something that we have to look at. Catherine also mentioned the fact that we had to move probation out of our justice center, right? And the problems with things like that. So the one aspect of growth that we sometimes fail to think about is the effect it has on our facilities. And so the criminal justice system is no different than any other system. And so it does require resources. And from time to time, it does require additional space. And that's just the facts of the matter. Everyone up here, I think they were very, I was very impressed that everyone in this panel said, obviously there are deficiencies in the current jail with regards to things like medical treatment, with regards to even something like the kitchen, with the conditions of confinement and the way we're treating people, especially those who are might have mental health needs or substance abuse issues. So addressing those needs is a particular challenge with the jail. The sheriff made a kind offer to take any of you into the jail, and I promise he'll let you out if you take him up on it. But I hope you do. I hope you do take advantage of that and gain some more information. I've been in office for a full decade, right? Maybe too long. Said no. Oh yeah, Shakespeare. But I still learn things about the operation of this system and how our criminal justice system really operates weekly, monthly. It's like an onion, and I don't mean because it stinks, but I mean because if you peel off a layer, you find another layer. And so it's a complex system. It's one that's not, and I commend the panel again, because it's not one that's easy to explain in 2-minute or 3-minute answers, right? And so I hope this serves as a means for folks to engage with us, to talk about these issues. I hope you gain some understanding, and it'll prompt greater discussion within the community, with the commissioners, with the folks who are sitting up here, and that's really our job. And so we look forward to that engagement with you. Commissioner Kafalis, did you have any final thoughts you might want to share?
Thank you, Tom. So I also wanted to thank the Fort Collins TV, the folks who are filming this. So I really don't like to be standing in front of you all, and please accept my apology, but I'll be very brief. So they deserve a lot of credit because we have this collaborative arrangement with the Fort Collins TV folks that they They videotape many of the things that we do, and we will be moving in the direction of videotaping, for example, the Administrative Matters meetings on Tuesday. And the goal is to have more transparency and make sure that there are other opportunities for folks to engage. So they deserve a lot of credit, and I'm glad we have that kind of collaboration. I get it that community engagement is not just a check off the box thing, so I appreciate the comments from Shirley. I am aware that there are at least 2 events coming up. I think one of them is the Fort Collins Community Action Network, the Salon event, and I think the League of Women Voters might be doing something, maybe even this coming week. So those are 2 examples of opportunities for folks to engage. The last thing I'll say is I appreciate you all being here. This is important, but a number of questions were raised and a number of ideas were brought up, perhaps could be viewed as low-hanging fruit. And I think those are things that merit further follow-up as far as some of the questions were raised about how have previous expansions been funded, et cetera, been paid for. And so my commitment to all of you is to continue that dialogue. I think we had a very constructive dialogue today. And just honestly, the last thing is this. We often tend to look at things in boxes or in silos. And so there were a number of assumptions made that the county is not doing anything else other than perhaps, well, in terms of housing, in terms of our role in providing wraparound services for permanent supportive housing. And I'm here to tell you that we are doing things that are actually helping address some of the problems with, the lack of affordable housing. And there's actually some really great opportunities that we're going to adopt and strategic plans that we're going to adopt in the coming months that will also create opportunities. I was in a meeting yesterday with the Loveland Housing Authority, and we were having very concrete discussions about a possible role for the county to engage in providing more services to people experiencing homelessness in the city of Loveland. So those things are happening, and I think we have to look at this, and I think we are as holistically as possible. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks for